Some films are great, some are not so much, and some suck so bad that they get their own documentary, society, and theatrical production. In the video today, we've got a list of movies that were terrible ideas to start with, they were then executed poorly, and have since gone on to not only be appreciated by the masses, but also loved more than any earnest arthouse picture ever would be. Unless, of course, that arthouse film featured vegetarian goblins. Number 10. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. People love Santa Claus and they love space, so in 1964 someone got the idea to merge the two together. Now someone, somewhere, must have thought, what a ridiculous idea, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Luckily, that sensible person was completely ignored and the result is Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. The acting, sets and costumes are terrible, though sort of endearingly so, while the internal film logic necessary for most movies to succeed is conspicuous in its absence. It didn't exactly conquer the world in 1964 and was pretty much forgotten about during the intervening decades. That is until Mystery Science Theater 3000 came along. Thanks to their riffing on the film, the Santa Martian love-in began. In the ensuing years, the kitsch classic has spawned its own comic, had a cameo on the Colbert Report, and has been riffed on by cinematic Titanic. In 1993, it even got its very own musical. Finding the home it was always destined for, it has been a staple of Comedy Central's Christmas season for years. Number 9. Robot Monster. Released in 3D in 1953, Robot Monsters features a robot in a gorilla suit, dinosaurs, and illogical robot-human attraction. Waylaid by budgetary trouble, it was shot in 4 days for about $16,000 and an over-reliance on stock footage from older movies, the movie never really stood a chance. George Barrows played both Roman, the titular robot, as well as his alien superior, the Great Guidance. Both characters' oddly similar voices are never explained. Director Phil Tucker's budget didn't stretch to anything as outlandish as a robot costume, so he got the next best thing, which was a gorilla suit. The nifty outfit was topped off with a rather spiffy diving helmet. Its production problems didn't stop it from technically being a financial success. It made almost $1 million on its theatrical release, making back its budget approximately 62 times over. It even managed a few decent reviews. Both Stephen King, who thought it was art of quite a high nature as a kid, and director John Carpenter have described it as a favorite. Number 8. Mystery of the Leaping Fish. Founding member of United Artists, friends to Charlie Chaplin and swashbuckling lead in The Mask of Zorro and Robin Hood, Douglas Fairbanks was a world-famous screen idol in the 1920s. Before he made the leap to screen god, though, Fairbanks appeared in some rather odd films. One such picture that he would come to regret appearing in was The Mystery of the Leaping Fish. The film is a parody of the Sherlock Holmes stories and lampoons the detective's love of all things narcotic. It features the erstwhile sleuth subtly named Coke Any Day, smoking and injecting his way through a literal bucket load of cocaine and opium. Like an untrained child still waiting to be potty trained, his clock only has 4 settings: eat, sleep, dope, and drink. Solving mysteries or work is clearly not a priority for this laissez-faire Sherlock. The farce's bizarre take on Arthur Conan Doyle's most famous creation has long since taken on cult status. The Museum of Modern Art in New York City screened a restored 35mm print version of the film in January of 2009. Number 7. Eegah. Here's the whole plot of Eegah, which was probably drafted on the back of a beer mat. A caveman appears in 1960s California and falls in love with a pretty Californian girl. Financed by Arch Hall Sr. as a starring vehicle for his son, Arch Hall Jr., it is another film in the long line of splendidly awful movies that have gained notoriety after appearing on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Hall Sr.'s off-screen line, "Look out for snakes," despite there being none on screen, became something of a running joke on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and it was also referenced in The Office. Number 6. Monster A Go-Go. As troubled productions go, this is right up there with Apocalypse Now, although it had the considerable advantage of not having to deal with an elephantine Marlon Brando. Monster's first director ran out of money, so Herschel Gordon Lewis bought the unfinished film and created a few additional scenes and some extra dialogue. Unfortunately, 4 years had elapsed since the initial production, and the director was unable to secure most of the original cast. So, well, he did the only reasonable thing he could do, and he replaced most of the characters halfway through the film with new ones who filled pretty much identical roles. One of the original cast members who did return no longer looked enough like himself to play the same character, so he played that character's brother. Not being able to afford things like sets or special effects, much of the important points of the plot take place off-screen. The capture of the titular monster, his escape, the unimportant stuff like that. Come the film's end, it was revealed that we had actually been had. There was no monster after all. Indeed, all we were left with was some terrible, terrible excuses for storytelling. Number 5. Starcrash. Now, is there any video that would not be improved by a mention of David Hasselhoff? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. But it is not this one. As you might have guessed from the title, Starcrash was a quickly and cheaply produced Star Wars cash-in. The production of the film was frequently halted due to financial issues, and its production company, American International Pictures, decided it was far, far too terrible to even release. This is where New World Pictures stepped in, and one of the world's greatest cinematic disasters was set free upon the world. It's been called a masterpiece of unintentionally bad filmmaking and has been compared to Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is the sort of praise any young filmmaker would sell his left testicle for. Number 4. Mac and Me. Proving that it's not just cheaply produced B-movies that can get things terribly wrong, or right depending on how you look at it, Mac and Me is another movie attempting to cash in on a cultural touchstone. It was happy to pilfer liberally from the legacy of E.T., telling the tale of a wheelchair-bound kid who befriends an escaped alien. They team up to phone home and reunite Mac with his family. The film is very happy to shill, hawk, and peddle as much merchandise as it could possibly fit into its 95-minute running time. The main character's name is Mac, who only consumes Coca-Cola and Skittles, while an impromptu 4-minute dance number takes place inside a McDonald's. The scene in question sees dozens of implausibly cheerful children inexplicably dancing in perfect sync, while a terrifying Ronald McDonald gazes on in the background. It comes off like an episode of Glee, but with more dancing alien. Now, at the present time, Mac has not managed to replace E.T. in the hearts of millions. But the film has become a running joke between Paul Rudd and Conan O'Brien, which is almost the same thing, right? Number 3. Plan 9 from Outer Space. Edward probably deserves a list all to himself, not to mention a knighthood. Universally lauded as the greatest worst director ever, Wood's hapless attempts at filmmaking have endeared him to audiences the world over. Tim Burton even dedicated a whole film to him. Plan 9 is his most famous creation and one of his most bonkers, although to be fair, they're all pretty bonkers. The basic story revolves around a group of aliens and their attempt to stop humanity making a doomsday device that would destroy the universe. There are also zombies thrown in apparently just for good measure. Things get really odd though with the fleeting appearances of Bela Lugosi. The Dracula star appeared in the movie despite the considerable handicap of being dead when filming began. Wood cut previously filmed footage of the fading star into his latest film with as much craft as a kindergarten production of Hamlet. He also hired his wife's chiropractor to impersonate Lugosi for the remainder of the film. Said chiropractor, though, he was a foot taller than Lugosi and didn't look a thing like him, so Wood just told him to walk around with a cape over his face the entire time. The good news is, though, that the only people who noticed this were severe nitpickers, which was apparently everybody in the universe. The continuity errors and clunky dialogue have become legendary. The best, perhaps, was the description of the cigar-shaped UFOs that were clearly saucer-shaped. Numerous documentaries have chronicled the marvelous madness at the heart of Wood's film, as well as songs, comic books, a video game, and even a theatrical adaptation. Number 2. Deathbed, the Bed That Eats. Deathbed, the Bed That Eats is another brilliantly titled film with some of the worst dialogue ever. For example, a dead man imprisoned in a painting exclaimed about the killer bed, "Oh my god, it's waking up." Technically, the bed doesn't actually eat anything, it seems to merely dissolve them in its digestive fluids while making chewing noises. The sound effects are terribly weird throughout and amount to a series of odd electronic blips, squeaks, and farts. Indeed, they very rarely have anything to do with the action that's going on screen. It's almost as if someone replaced the actual soundtrack with the sound of a kid playing Space Invaders. Also, a large amount of the dialogue takes place in people's heads. Created by director George Barry way back in 1977, for decades it only existed as a bootleg video. Then the director noticed it had gained quite an online fan base and released it on DVD in 2003. It remains the only film that Barry has ever made. Number 1. Troll 2. Troll 2 has the distinction of having perhaps the single greatest terrible plot in the history of film, maybe even the history of storytelling itself. It tells that classic Shakespearean tale of a family being pursued by vegetarian goblins who seek to turn the humans into plants so that they can eat them. The first thing that should be pointed out about Troll 2, besides the wonderful plot, is that it was not conceived as a sequel to the 1986 film Troll. Its distributor didn't think that it could succeed on its own, shocker I know, and thus renamed and repackaged it as a sequel. There is no connection between the films whatsoever. Also, no actual trolls appear in Troll 2 unless you count the person who wrote this piece of trash as a troll. The film is awful by pretty much any criteria imaginable. It's so awful, in fact, that you can't find the whole thing online. With terrible acting, horrendous dialogue, and a plot as mad as a room full of jokers, it should be about as enjoyable as a hacksaw to the genitals. Of course, though, quality has never stopped a film becoming a cult hit. Since its release in 1990, Troll 2 has garnered a dedicated following. Its journey from critical derision to cult classic was chronicled in the documentary Best Worst Movie. Directed by Michael Stevenson, the child star in Troll 2, the documentary received pretty much universal acclaim, something that its subject never received. So I really hope you liked that video. If you did, give us a thumbs up below, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Looking for something else to watch? Why not check out another video linked to on the screen? And as always, thank you for watching.